in the last few years, I've begun to think that we have an established democracy, but it doesn't work very well. So I won't. But that is maybe important because it may be, there's a deeply entrenched commitment to democracy in this country. I think that is true. I think people share that. But 20 years of failed economies, failed economics, with lots of frustrated people, living standards stagnating, democratic politicians behaving pretty stupidly and immorally, to put it mildly, which I think we've seen. And people might say, we need someone to come along and clean this up. This democracy doesn't work anymore. And I think people are putting a lot of hope into a changing government. But let's suppose it doesn't work. And the problems they're going to face are very, very big.
They got no money.
They got no money,
yeah.
Exactly. So I don't think the story is over even here. The most powerful allies we have are first and foremost the United States, and then our European neighbors. Well, let's take the historical example of Britain. Between 1939 September and 1941, Britain was essentially alone in fighting the Second World War, and it was really touch and go. I mean, people tend to forget how close this was to failing. Now, if the United States had never engaged in the war as an ally, we couldn't have won it. Either Germany would have won it or Russia would have won it. And imagine that Germany or Russia controlled the whole of Europe and America was indifferent. We couldn't have survived on our own. We're just not big enough and more powerful enough. It is crucial to remember the post-war world, post-Second World War world, in which basically all of us have lived, unless you're in your late 80s now, was actually created by the United States after the war. Some sort of basic principles, an alliance of free countries, free trade, free markets. And the period since 1950, for all its many faults, has been the period of the largest improvements in living standards in world history, staggering improvements in life expectancy, even in very poor countries, though I wouldn't say development has been a total success, but we never tried to deliberately push for economic development at all. Anyway, it was empires instead. The empires went, again, this with varying success, but the United States provided security. The Soviet Union disappeared, and I can remember very well how threatening it was to have this giant army in the middle of Europe, and it was a giant army. So the United States has been, really since the First World War, then it went away again in the 20s and 30s, then it came back, the basic guarantor of the security and survival of the democratic order, broadly defined, because they were so committed to it. Now, if you have a United States which actually thinks, and a lot of people in the Republican Party now do, that Putin is their friend, Putin is their friend, not Zelensky or Western Europe. The EU is the enemy. They're not going to say, well, democratic Britain is on our side. They're not. They don't care about them. So then what you have in the world? Well, you have Russia and China, two nuclear-armed autocracies. You have America, which at the best is ambivalent, also nuclear-armed and the most powerful country in the world. And none of them care about the survival of democracy anymore. That's going to be a very, very uncomfortable world for a country of this size. It's not big enough to defend itself on its own. And where are its allies going to come from? So I think it would be very naive to suppose this world will be friendly. Just give you one example. We are a trading nation, even more so now than after that we're outside the EU. Britain has always been a trading nation, except when it stole places and called it empire, right? So we're a trading country. We're a trading country before empire and afterwards. Now, Mr. Trump has said when he comes in, he's going to put a 10% tariff on everything. That will affect all the British who try to export to the United States. There will be retaliation across the world. Will that be just against the US or will it be more general? We don't know. All the rules of trade will have gone. So on which a country like us this does depend. We may not notice it, but we do notice the trade with Europe has already got more difficult as a result of leaving the EU. Now, this would make the whole world more difficult. And we hoped we would replace the EU with global Britain. Well, it's really difficult to do global Britain in a world in which protection is becoming increasingly important. And the only countries that survive in that world are ones with huge domestic markets like China or the United States. We're not that country. We are, relatively speaking, a small open country, a small open economy, and we can't defend ourselves against these colossi. I mean, we don't begin to have the military capable of doing that. So I think it would be very, very naive and and short-sighted to believe that America can change in this way, particularly, but also some of our European neighbors. If we have Marine Le Pen, for instance, as president of France, she comes from a fascist party background. We don't know what she would do. We cannot assume that the world will be anything like the world we have taken for granted in the last 70 odd years. And that's why I started my book in the way I did, just to remind people it was different. And for people living in this country who fought two colossal world wars, horrifyingly different.
That's a clip from our chat with Martin Wolf. What a talker. If you want to see the man chat, click the link right here.